So today we're going to be talking about Belize and the languages that are there. First is Belize Creole. It's basically a Creole English. They use it down there mostly for emphasis and for meaningful sentences or conversations. And then there's Northern Belize Spanish, which is also known as NBS or Spanglish/Ghetto Spanish, and it's definitely the lesser version, even though Spanish doesn't really have a standard out there. English is the official language of Belize, but they also have what they call Spanish or Real Spanish, and it wasn't introduced in schools until 1998, so it's relatively new. In the 1970s and 80s, there were wars in Central America which destabilized Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador. So many of those people migrated out of their native countries and into Belize, which gave the country a lot of contact with Spanish, and so there was more Spanish dialects that influenced the language.
So the article mentioned some of the research that had been done, and so as they did the research, they conducted it in such a way they had two groups that they were interviewing. There was a group of high school students, and there was a group of an older generation around 20 to 40 years old. And so these interviews were conducted in Belizean Creole, and the people were also asked to take short surveys to rate different things on a scale of 1 to 7. So they found that with the younger group, they preferred to use the Creole language as opposed to using Spanish or English. They considered that they would be judged if they use just the standard languages, and they also did not prefer code switching. They instead opted just to use Belizean Creole, and many times their parents would have to translate for them for people that only spoke one of the other two languages. The older group, they were more pro code switching. They thought it demonstrated linguistic mastery, and they really appreciated their bilingual and trilingualism, and they also opted to use Spanish more. So the older group seemed to embrace their mixed identity a little bit more. Both groups, however, said that using their native Belizean accent was important to them because it was a part of their linguistic identity. There was a quote in the article, and it said that ethnic identity is twin skin to linguistic identity. I am my language, and until I take pride in my language, I cannot take pride in myself. We can see that this is somewhat true for this group. They're very proud of their own language, but at the same time, many of the citizens are bilingual and trilingual, so certain languages represent them in certain ways. There's not one language that represents them as a whole.
So some of the issues that they had in the study, or that the groups that they chose weren't quite large enough to get a really good understanding of the depth that the languages were spoken and how they were spoken and kind of in what situations.
Another problem is that they failed to test older generations. They had a group of high schoolers and a middle-aged group, but they didn't test an older generation to see if that affected the preferences in language use at all, and that could have helped them identify more trends.
They also didn't really ask enough questions. They asked a lot of questions about how the language was used in public settings, but not nearly as many questions or any questions were asked about the home life use of any of these languages, or just kind of anything outside of public use.
And the final problem was that the interview itself was more biased towards the Creole language. It was conducted in that language, and so the people spoke that language as they were answering the questions, which may have caused their responses to be a little more biased towards the Creole language itself.
And that's our video.